Hello and welcome to Hank Games Without Hank. Here we are at the East Point Arena taking on Sunderland. Thunderland. We're going to try to beat them. We're going to do our very best to defeat them, even though we're on the road. This is an important game for us. This is the kind of mid-table opponent. I know I say they're all important games, but you know what? When you're trying to win, it's Derek Milborough. All right. When you are trying to win the Barclays Premier League title, literally every game is important. This is a game where even though we're on the road and even though we're against someone who's probably going to finish in the top 10, 3 points would be really, really great. You'll never guess who's starting in goal, unless you guess that it's 42-year-old overweight sensation Fat Lucas. Fat Lucas back in the Swindon Town Swoodley Pooper lineup. Who could have ever imagined it? He tried to retire. He became our goalkeeping coach. We kept him on the roster at my insistence. He was very reluctant even to remain on the roster. He wanted to just become a full-time coach, but I was like, there's room enough for some player coaches on this squad. And sure enough, here he is. Back in the game. And you know what? To be honest with you, he's loving it. It's so fun to see him come off the pitch at the end of the day. He's just he's so into it, It's awesome. Speaking of awesome, that could have been great, but it wasn't. Today I'm going to talk about the Middle East peace crisis and how to solve it. But before I do that, let me just state a few things for the record. I'm probably going to make some people mad, so I'm sorry to anyone I make mad. Secondly, I'm not an expert in this topic, or really, any topic other than conjoined twins. And you shouldn't necessarily take anything that I say very seriously. Speaking of seriousness, I think he just needed to, you know what I needed to do there? I needed to calmly cut back, turn, and take the shot. That would have been magical. No, it's not a foul! Don't give me a yellow card for being so good-looking. Dang it! I will admit to being very handsome. It was a little late, but there was some passion in it. It's the red boots that make me angrier. All right. Stupid yellow cards. So, for those of you who don't know anything about this, the nation of Israel, which was founded in, I believe, 1948, like I said, not an expert, has been more or less constantly in some kind of conflict with much of the Arab world surrounding Israel, which is, all of those countries are majority Muslim. Most of them are majority Sunni, except for Iran and Iraq. And to some extent, this has been, it's a cheap. If you're an Arab leader, talking about Israel is a cheap way to get people to like you. It's cheap because it literally doesn't cost any money. You don't have to do anything for your people or for your government, and or to make the lives your own government run better or any of that stuff. So it's cheap in the literal sense, but it's also cheap in the sense that it doesn't actually do anything to make the lives of people living in the Palestinian territories any better. Alternately, or on the other side of that coin, the government of Israel has moved further and further to the right in the last 20 years. So we are now a long, long way away from where we were back in, say, the early to mid-'90s, when it looked like a peace accord, a lasting peace accord that would set up two states, one an Israeli state that was at peace with its neighbors, and one Palestinian state that could kind of grow on its own. We are a long, long way from that. Once appeared sort of likely, and now we're a long way from it. No, it's a goal! Ball John Green! Ball John Green, John Green. He gives it all for the team. Upon his mustache wear keen. Ball John Green, John Green. What a fantastic goal from Ball John Green. Scoring with his feet. Many of you criticize me for not scoring more goals with the feet. Well, how do you like them apples? That was a serious foot score right there. There's no denying it. Suddenly we're up 1-0 on Sunderland, and we're hungry for more. No, obviously I wanted you to pass it to your husband in that situation. What could you possibly have been thinking? I think I'll pass it out of bounds. Maybe Coach wants me to pass it out of bounds. No, I wanted you to pass it to your husband. Always to your husband. No, other John Green, to your husband. These guys, suddenly there's a lot of confusion on Swindon Town. So really, not only that, but the Palestinian government, such as it exists, has also moved dramatically to the right, so that parts of Palestine are now under the control of Hamas, and since the death of Yasser Arafat, who was admittedly no saint in the field of leadership, things have gone really quite far downhill for the quality of governance in the Palestinian territories. Although the counter to that is that they can't, in many ways, control their own governance. Although the counter to that is that the reason they can't control their own governance is that they can't guarantee security for Israel. So, with all of that in mind, what is my solution? First off, this is very complicated, and you have to recognize the legitimacy of other people's narratives, which is extremely hard. And particularly in a situation like this, you have to recognize the legitimacy of other people's narratives, because a lot of people have died. A lot of people have died, and there is, of course, going to be an urge to honor the lives of those who have died by not... Get up, John Green, by not abandoning the fight, What? What is the Oh, really? 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 I mean, is it even is it even a game if you can't do a bit of ankle hugging here and there? So, it's tremendously difficult for people living in the Palestinian territories to recognize the legitimacy of Israel's existence and to recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli narrative that this is a place that that most of what Israel is doing is at least to its mind, in defense of its own security. Similarly, it's very hard if you're Israeli to recognize the legitimacy of the Palestinian narrative, which is that of a displaced community that doesn't have any ability to recognize, to have self-determination, and also has experienced quite a lot of violence, and that the violence against the occupying force is, like a lot of violence against occupying forces, seen as justified and an important part of the struggle. Both sides are going to have to recognize that those narratives make sense within the communities in which they are the dominant narrative in order to ever move forward. That may seem impossible, but in fact it's not impossible. You see it working really interestingly, actually, right now in Northern Ireland, where there was this admittedly much less violent but equally seemingly intractable... that's a foul! Oh, he kicked me in the knees! Equally seemingly intractable conflict between people who thought that Northern Ireland should be part of Ireland and people who thought that Northern Ireland should not be part of Ireland. Come on. Oh, you've got to score there. I tried to whip it in with the RLB button, whatever it is, RB button. Dang it. But in fact, now in Northern Ireland, it's really interesting to see people recognize the legitimacy of the other's narrative and to find what appears to be a pretty stable... That's a foul from behind, and there was no one between him and the goal. That should be a red card. Instead, it isn't. No, that wasn't a difficult save for the goalie. So, right. So places like Northern Ireland, and there are many other examples, really do give me hope that this is a addressable problem. Speaking of addressable problems, it's ball John Green, other John Green. Do a dance. Show me a dance. It doesn't matter what you do. Yes, that's beautiful. That's lovely. Oh, and then they hug because they're in love. John Green's ball, another John Green's. They're the best forwards that Swindon Town has ever seen. This is fun, man. This is old school Swoodly Pooper football, scoring with our feet, like we used to back in the halcyon days of League One, when we were at semi-pro skill level. Man, I miss those days. I could score 10 goals a game in semi-pro. So the craziest part about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that for the last about 30 years, most people have agreed on what the solution would probably be if there is ever to be a solution. some kind of shared Jerusalem as a capital, some two-state solution where, I mean, there have been points where, like, they were even pretty close to agreement on what the sort of physical shapes of these states should look like, which settlements Israel would have to give up, things like that, and everybody kind of knows what it's going to look like if it ever happens. Like, if there is ever, to be a lasting peace, everyone kind of knows what it's likely going to look like. Now, to be fair, I don't think Netanyahu wants it to look like this, and I don't think Hamas does either at the moment, nor does anybody in the remnants of the other Palestinian political parties. So, just to be clear, like, I'm not saying that it's in any way close to happening, but it's feasible. There is a solution. In the same way that for a long time there was a way of imagining a sort of politicization of the IRA that would and demilitarization of the IRA that would result in Republicans having some representation in the Northern Irish government and working peaceably toward their political roles. It is possible to imagine, a world in which the Middle East is living at peace. Well, maybe not at peace because of Iran. But, like, there's certainly a world in which everybody would be equally mad about Iran and worried about Iran, like, which is kind of the world in which we live, actually. I mean, Iran doesn't have any friends in the Middle East at the moment, just to be clear. Or I guess they have some, but they don't have a lot. I mean, Assad, not really, a little bit. Increasingly, Iran is pretty isolated. That's a foul. That's a yellow card. That you hurt my guy. You hurt him with running into him with your chest. Made him feel sad. So, yeah, I mean, I think the key for me in terms of the actual solution is a two-state solution with a shared Jerusalem, but the key in terms of how you make that happen, that was close to the longest goal in Swindon Hooper history, is changing the way you think about the other, and that's no easy task. And I don't claim otherwise, because everybody's story makes sense. Certainly within the confines of the story itself. You've got to learn to curve that ball in, like Luis Suarez does. You guys lost, so you had to grab your knees and feel shame while you have a very bad haircut. Congratulations to the Swindon Town Swoodley Poopers, again with a 2-0 victory. This has to be great for our goal differential, which could be vital as we head toward the end of the season. The transfer window has opened, so I'm going to try to find a player. It's great to see. Look at the passion. They just love each other. They're very physical about it. It's beautiful to see. Thanks for watching. Best wishes.